Missouri's coaching has been both bad and good this season. I'll explain right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. And a lot of Missouri basketball talk coming up on the show today. Hey, that's what happens after you get smoked by Alabama, but also a week out from the tip-off of the season. Dennis Gates also adding his second member to that 2025 recruiting class as well. But I do want to start talking about Mizzou football. Unfortunately, not a great showing for our Tigers against Alabama, of course, and my biggest blame was pointed squarely at the coaching staff following the game. Certainly, the Missouri players have plenty of their blame as well, but to me, I want to be clear what I'm talking about in terms of coaching here, because it's not as though it's all bad for Missouri right now. The Tigers still remain just inside of the top 25, ranked 25th in the AP poll right now. Heck, the Tigers went out, you're still looking at a 10-win season. That's not all bad around here. So, again, it's not as though the Eli Drinkwitz era is a complete disaster and he needs to be fired or something like that. Let's not go completely insane. In fact, there's nobody on this coaching staff who I'm recommending that Missouri fires at the moment. And when it comes to coaching, my complaints about coaching, particularly in the Texas A&M and Alabama game, it's not as though motivation appears to be an issue on this team. I don't think the Tigers ever quit in those ball games, and especially when looking at the entire season, I think it would be really unfair to assume such a thing. It's not as though the Tigers quit when they were down 14-3 against Boston College, or when they were trailing against Vanderbilt, or when they were trailing and seemed to be completely out of the game against the Auburn Tigers just a couple of weeks ago. I've said it before, and I think it's worth saying again, Eli Drinkwitz teams don't quit. Motivationally, I think Eli and his staff do a great job. But I have to say, it seems like in terms of preparation and X's and O's, sometimes we have a bit of trouble adjusting in game, it would seem. And sometimes that can be lazily thrown around, I think, that term. Like, oh, where are our adjustments in the football commentariat? But here's what I specifically mean here. I think on the road against Texas A&M, Missouri basically said, hey, we prepared for Marcel Reed, and Connor Wigman, him being out there, took us by surprise. A similar excuse, by the way, came from LSU this past weekend, interestingly enough. So that was a fascinating thing to see Blake Baker, the former Missouri defensive coordinator, on the wrong side of the Marcel Reed switcheroo, except, it went the other way this time. It was Reed who came in for a relatively ineffective Wigman. So a bit of irony there for sure. But defensively, I have to say I thought Missouri seemed very well prepared. The game plan was being executed quite well on that side of the ball until a flurry of Missouri interceptions turned the field position and the ball game around. As I said in my previous episode, it felt like the dam just broke. So I'll give Missouri a 50-50 defensively. But obviously, you got to give them an 0 for 2 and a failing grade on those two important road games this season on the offensive side of the ball. And speaking of the football commentariat, there's one former football insider Mike Lombardi, who likes to say about Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel, he calls him DJ Mikey D because he likes to play the hits, basically. In other words, he's got his plays that he likes to run, and he's going to run them regardless of context, of game situation, and all that kind of good stuff. I wouldn't go so far as to call Kirby Moore a DJ at this point, but there does seem to be a little bit of that permeating throughout, I think, the Missouri program right now, especially on the offensive side of the ball. It seems like when things are working for the Tigers, they work very well, but when our signature plays, our motion plays to get Burden in motion, throw little quick outs, that type of thing, when the defense is on that, it seems like we have a tough time adjusting, especially in a season where the deep shots just haven't been connecting. That's not all on Brady Cook, though. A lot of it is on Brady Cook, to be sure. I think the receivers, the offensive line, the play calling, I think the entire team deserves at least a small piece of the pie for the issues that the offense has had so far this season. And also in my previous episode, some listeners and viewers seem to take a little bit of umbrage with me pointing out that the Missouri receivers, to me as a group, have not really lived up to the billing, at least my own expectations from this past offseason. Let's put it that way. And some people thought that that was trying to deflect blame from Brady Cook, a guy I've been a big fan of for a long time, a guy I called basically a Missouri legend for his performance against Auburn a couple weeks ago. Well, Cook certainly deserves his portion of the blame for what's happened this season. I highlighted a few weeks ago how, frankly, dreadful Brady Cook's numbers have been under pressure so far this season. Cook, like most quarterbacks last season, obviously the numbers are significantly different under pressure than with a clean pocket. But this season, boy, those numbers really took a tumble, and there's no way to not give some of that blame to the quarterback, no matter who he is. But I still think it's fair to point out that the Missouri receivers, just as a whole, as a group, have just not been as good as I expected. I think there's been times when they've struggled to separate against man coverage, against better opponents, and also I think they've lacked a little bit of extra effort, I think, in the scramble drills when so often Cook has had to leave the pocket because of poor pass protection, but also occasionally his own lack of awareness in the pocket. Cook will, to be fair, abandon clean pockets, and that sometimes happens more often, of course, when you do not trust your pass protection as well. Again, this isn't about deflecting blame from Cook. I just think I'm just trying to give my evaluation of the entire team at this point. I think it all has to be better. And I also think that Missouri has missed Nate Noel when he's been out here, especially last week against Alabama, more than I would have thought. I think Eli Drinkwitz protected him in the preseason for a couple reasons. Number one, he's had some injury troubles in the past, missed a few games last season with Appalachian State, but I think in retrospect, I said all offseason I thought Nate Noel fit the Missouri outside zone running scheme more. That was a very similar scheme run by App State last season, but it seemed like Missouri really needed him in that particular part of their offense more than anything, because once Noel was out, once you had Marcus Carroll and Jamal Roberts, who performed, I thought, pretty well against Alabama, they certainly weren't the problem. But at the same time, so much of the Missouri offensive scheme created not just by Kirby Moore, but previously through Eli Drinkwitz as well, is sort of predicated on that Denver Broncos late 90s Terrell Davis kind of outside zone running scheme where you bootleg off of it back to the right on occasion. Well, Missouri just didn't have a lot of that portion of its playbook with Marcus Carroll. It's more of a straight line type of runner. That's something I saw this past offseason, but I have to say I'm a little bit surprised by how much I thought Nate Noel has been missed in the Mizzou running game so far. And coming up, a lot of talk online the last few days about Eli Drinkwitz and his quarterback recruiting and management for Missouri so far in his tenure. I want to talk about that coming up in the show, including a tendency I think Drinkwitz needs to take out of his recruiting at quarterback, in my opinion. First, though, before we get there, let's talk about FanDuel, because it's time to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel sports book app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a ball game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today and be honest. I saved you some money this past weekend. I told you to stay off the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, a nice win by KC, but the Raiders with the classic backdoor cover, a touchdown that didn't mean anything unless you were giving the 9.5 points. But regardless, you got to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Obviously, Brady Cook has not been as good this season as he was last season, just like the entire Missouri offense, to be brutally honest. And to be even more brutally honest, Drew Pine hasn't been up to snuff either. The talking points were, and I had bought into this, that, hey, Pine will at least be a solid backup just in case Brady Cook gets injured. So far, that has not been the case. And because of that, a lot of talk about Eli Drinkwitz, his quarterback management on this Missouri roster. And no question, there have been some misses over the years in terms of evaluation. One thing I'll say, Drinkwitz really enjoys, or is at least not afraid of short quarterbacks, guys who are small in stature, particularly guys who are shorter than 6 feet tall, including Drew Pine, but also high school recruits Tyler Macon and Jabari Johnson, a couple of guys who transferred and are no longer on the Missouri roster. So there were some definite misses there in terms of quarterback evaluation. Even, starting Sean Robinson from his very beginning tenure, only ultimately to move him to safety in favor of Connor Bazelak. There are questions certainly about his evaluation at quarterback, but at the same time, I do think Drinkwitz gets credit, by the way, for recruiting Jaden Daniels. All accounts were, and we know Daniels took an official in-person visit to Missouri. A lot of reporting out there that Daniels basically was wrapped up. It was a Missouri to Big Ten type of done deal. Sarcasm, emphasis there on Jaden Daniels. But even though the Tigers and Drinkwitz didn't seal the deal there, if we're just talking about evaluation, that was a pretty great evaluation, wasn't it? Because there were a lot of people, including myself, who thought, hey, this Daniels kid, he's one heck of a runner. Will the passing actually go to the next level? I'm not so sure. Obviously, it did in a huge way, to the point where not only did he win the Heisman Trophy, he's the talk of the National Football League this season as a rookie. So Daniels was a great evaluation by Eli Drinkwitz, without a doubt. Sam Horn, so far that's just looking like bad luck, because the tough thing is we're in year 3 here of the Sam Horn experience. I still have absolutely no idea if he's good or not. If you think you have an opinion there, by all means, let me know. I'm not sure what it would be based on at this point for anyone. We just simply don't have enough evidence to make an evaluation one way or the other. Bottom line is, I think with all coaches, you're going to have some hits and you're going to have some misses evaluating high school quarterbacks. It's just a really, really difficult thing to do. But if I'm Eli Drinkwitz and I'm evaluating my own performance, I got to say, I think I might be done with quarterbacks who are small in stature, guys who are shorter than 6 feet tall. you almost just got to mark them off unless they're just truly, truly special athletically, like Kyler Murray, for example, that type of player. But I think more often than not, those guys are going to struggle at the SEC level. It just goes to show you what a special player Chase Daniel was, I think, to overcome that. And also, hey, a nice offensive design in retrospect by Dave Christensen and Dave Yost as well. All right, enough football. Let's change topics. I'm sick of the gridiron for a moment. Missouri on a bye week anyway. Let's talk about the hardwood. Let's talk about Missouri basketball. And actually, give me 1 second here. I'm going to hit pause on take this call. All right, we're back. My apologies. And on Missouri basketball, finally another member of the 2025 class, Columbia's Aaron Rowe, a local point guard, obviously. Father Tolton High School, the first member of the class, has been in the fold for about a year now, in fact. Well, another member of the class, this time from another in-state guy, Vashon High School's Nicholas Randall, who ultimately is, bottom line to me, is just a high upside type of player, because a guy who's now grown into 6'8"-ish, let's say, he moves very well for that size. And that's the type of player, if you're Missouri, you want to take a shot on. If somebody who's just outside of the top 100 nationally, that's exactly the type of body that I think Dennis Gates and his staff is going to want to take a chance on. And if you think that, well, Creighton and San Francisco were Missouri's biggest competition there, you might think, oh, gosh, we were competing with Kentucky and those type of teams a cycle or two ago. Listen, Creighton has been a lot better than Missouri the last 10 years or so, including a Creighton team that's projected to be a top 15 type of ball club once again this season under Greg McDermott. So I wouldn't be as dismissive of a guy that Creighton wants as if you don't follow college basketball maybe as closely as you do college football. So Nicholas Randall, definitely a bit of a project, I would say. Like most guys, is his jumper going to come along? That's a big question with a lot of freshmen these days. It's either you are a good shooter and maybe you're not quite the athlete that we would like, or you're the athlete that we would like. You have the requisite size. Well, does the shot come along or not? That's often the question these days in modern basketball. But as a project, a guy who probably isn't going to play a ton as a true freshman, I wouldn't think. My one thing is I do worry that those types can get lost in the shuffle a bit too easily these days in the free transfer portal era. Just from a roster management standpoint, what exactly do you do to keep those types of players engaged on your roster so they don't immediately start looking around and thinking, hey, where can I actually get some playing time next season? Is this really the place for me to develop? How do you develop players who aren't playing? That's a real question, I think, especially in this day and age. And with exactly 1 week until Missouri's basketball opener, I want to talk about why this is an important one to watch for Missouri basketball fans and what I'll be looking for in this ball game coming up here in just a little bit. But first, are you ready for some hockey? It's hockey season, and like all live events, GameTime is the place to get your tickets to St. Louis Blues games and, of course, all types of live events, concerts, the whole deal. Not just sports, theater shows, the whole thing. I'm telling you, GameTime picks, that's the feature you want to toggle on every single time. For example, if you want to go to the Enterprise Center a week from tomorrow, see the Blues take on the Tampa Bay Lightning, heck, you can get $17 all-in tickets. Again, toggle that all-in pricing, as I always say, as well, so you'll know exactly what you're getting yourself into before checkout. I'm telling you, you're going to love GameTime and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON COLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So a week from today, next Monday, Missouri opens up with a very rare road season opener, by the way, at Memphis. And I believe I looked this up this summer, so I'm not going to do it again, but I'm pretty darn sure this is the first time Missouri's opened up with a true road game since the ill-fated 2003-2004 season opened up with a pretty close Missouri victory, definitely a too close for comfort Missouri victory at Oakland. Was Jim Sturk our athletic director back then too? What a strange bit of scheduling that was. But I will say this is going to be one to watch. If you're a Missouri basketball fan, mark this one down on your calendar. For sure, be in front of a television next week as Missouri takes on Memphis in basketball. I'm pretty sure the Chiefs are playing a Monday Night Football game. At least DVR it. You're going to want to see this one because the Tigers don't play anyone remotely good for another month. And if you think that's an exaggeration, I promise you it isn't. The Tigers don't play anybody ranked inside of the top, projected in Ken Palm's top 200 until December 3rd when Cal comes to town. Then the next game for the Tigers will be a home game against the Kansas Jayhawks. So you're going to have hopefully, if Missouri's any good anyway, you're going to have a month of pretty non-competitive, boring basketball. I got to be honest with you, especially, well, if the Mizzou football team is going to go into a tailspin here, it's going to be kind of a bummer November. I hate to say it. Hopefully the Mizzou football team can obviously turn it around and have a strong finish to the season. But regardless, it's going to be kind of boring basketball. Hopefully it'll be the boring type of basketball from a couple years ago when Missouri was playing non-competitive games, but at least was playing a brand of basketball that gave you a lot of hope for the future. Like I said before, that Oakland game 21 years ago, well, that didn't exactly inspire a lot of confidence and was indeed a harbinger of bad things to come. A Missouri team that was good offensively but couldn't get any stops. It's been kind of a theme of the Dennis Gates era through 2 seasons. Can this team get any stops? That's really something I'm going to be watching. Obviously, I'm going to be curious to see how this offense shakes out, how exactly Missouri is going to attack, who gets the most touches and shots, all of that good stuff. But what I'm really curious to see is defensively. Is Missouri anything but – are they better than hot garbage? Because that's basically what they've been the last 2 seasons defensively. You could kind of understand it, an undersized team 2 years ago with a lot of new faces, a brand new player a bunch of brand new players, a brand new coach, brand new program. Hey, Missouri was trying to junk it up with a really good offensive team. Just try to, create turnovers defensively. Understood. Last year, I'm just not seeing any excuses for the type of defense we played. One good thing defensively, I'll say, it seemed like from the scrimmage, I didn't watch the scrimmage, by the way. I wasn't able to attend, had some things going on, but Anthony Robinson, while Tony Perkins, who's probably going to be the Missouri starting point guard, missing this, it wasn't a scrimmage, I should say an exhibition game against Lincoln. We'll have to see what's up with Tony Perkins and his status going forward, but good to see Anthony Robinson was very active by all accounts, getting a lot of steals, being the point man, not just of the offense, but importantly of the defense as well. Missouri is going to be bigger at point guard defensively. That should be very helpful, especially in in-game type of pick-and-roll situations. Also very encouraging, Caleb Grill was hot from downtown, hitting 5 3-pointers. Mark Mitchell, the transfer from Duke, hit a couple of long balls as well. Mitchell already seems to have changed the mechanics of his shot, which were rather unorthodox at Duke, to say the least. Seems like at the very least he's getting his shooting elbow more straight up and down. If he can find some consistency there, a little bit more consistency with the shot, Mark Mitchell is kind of a do-it-all player, so if he can improve that shot significantly, look out. He could easily be an all-SEC type of performer. I also love, of course, my guy, Peyton Marshall. Loved hearing that he got plenty of touches at the center position when he was in his limited minutes. A lot of limited minutes. Lots of guys seeing action in this game, of course, but good to see that Marshall was the offense kind of ran through him, it sounded like. Mixed results, of course, but I like seeing that. If you're going to have a guy like Marshall on the roster, you better use his girth and offensive acumen around the basket when he's in the ball game and make those mice in the house pay. And by the way, speaking of playing a lot of guys, it's one thing to play 12 to 15 guys against Lincoln, but far too often Dennis Gates has fallen in love with having double-digit rotations. I hate to say it, there's no real evidence in college basketball history, unless you want to argue about that Kentucky team from 10 years ago that had Devin Booker coming off the bench, John Calipari doing 5-man hockey-like line changes. Other than that, who's ever succeeded in a serious way playing more than 10 guys at the same time? I would argue Missouri's got to settle on 7 to 8 guys. That's basically how it always ends up shaking out. Even a team like the 93-94 Missouri Tigers that went undefeated in Big 8 play, that's one of those teams that I always think of as having a lot of depth, a team that played as many as 12 guys. And that was true, but they did it situationally. They wouldn't play all of those guys a lot of minutes in every game. If you look at it, well, there were really only 7 guys that played double-digit minutes, and all of those guys played 18 minutes or more. And just for a quick rundown memory lane, we're talking Melvin Booker, Javon Crudup, Kelly Thames as a true freshman, Paul O'Linney, Mark Atkins, Lamont Frazier, and Julian Winfield. That was your core 7 guys. All of them played 18 minutes per game or more. Then you had Marlo Finner playing 9 minutes per game as your 8th man. Then it was basically a lot of situations where, hey, if you needed Derek Grimm and Jason Sutherland as true freshmen, if you needed Reggie Smith and his defense and veteran presence on the perimeter, if you needed Chris Heller inside as a center, maybe Crudup got in trouble, or maybe you were playing against more of a true center, back to the basket guy offensively with real size. For whatever reason, you could use those guys situationally, but it was very obvious who the core 7 or 8 guys were from Missouri. Dennis Gates likes to talk to Norm Stewart and bring him out occasionally. Well, I think he's got to take a play out of Norm Stewart's playbook and find a core 7 to 8 guys this season for Missouri to find the best version of itself. So regardless, thank you all so much for listening to this show. As always, appreciate you being patient with me, especially that phone call in the middle of the show. I was also an absolute mess, covered in dust and paint yesterday. I've got stuff going on outside of the program, folks. It's a big week for me. We're going to get through it, and thank you for sticking with me right here on Locked On Mizzou.